Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Mish-Mashing Battle Lounge with the 2MK team. Today, as people make their final preparations for ECT, that title has a meaning. I've forgotten what it means. FGC member 20. Whatever.
Round one. Fight.
I was gonna say I was assuming quote-unquote Zero Beast to begin with, but... Yep. Eyeball meaties, wow. Okay, great. It has been a while since I met someone that could do this consistently, and I am really happy right now for this moment. So let's turn it actually on, given that. Yep, and you block this time. Perfect. The so-called Zero Beasts are my favorite opponent type in this game, because you know that they don't care about their rank, they don't care, they haven't been conditioned for however long to fight based on what will get them through the current rankings. You know that when you see them, you are ready to face someone who is just interested in playing this game. Whew. Yep. Which means better things for my Ryu. No, that one I was blocking. Means a lot of things from the Ryu matchup because I have not fought a good Ryu in so long. Well, no, that's not true. I fought a good Ryu, but one that plays the very defensive style that runs backward all the time. Can I even catch you? I don't think I can. Nope. It is disappointing in a different way because the number of things you learn from Ryu that don't know how to fight is nearly zero. And that makes a pretty much perfect point for our stream today. With the main downside being that if Omni beats this person, I doubt they're hanging around. But we'll see, because this is actually one of those things that comes up a lot. This is not necessarily an opponent type that Omni Rabbit is conditioned to deal with. Unfortunately, our local is getting better, but the players here don't always play in this way. So the sheer boldness is something you literally have to get yourself back to mentally. Oh, Guile, even worse. But technically better. Our lounge is already almost full. But do understand that if you want to like push around to get to the beginning, you can let us know. We might do something for you. Offense Guile A. Yep, offense Guile. It's kind of distracting how long it's been since we had to face a player that could do this or would do this. It isn't even just that they make you think about defense more, because that's not the full picture. Making you think about defense differently is where it shifts a lot. I'm going to really hope that this doesn't get terribly boring because of the lag. But there's no indication so far that the player will adapt much or care in any way that shifts things, so no. Dealing with the raw speed here is also going to matter. And there's always, in our case, the actual possibility that this is literally an ECT opponent coming into literally practice against one of us earlier than the tournament, which honestly works for both sides, so it's not like we care. But it's hard to turn back on the specific offense side of the brain that this often takes if you haven't been playing other offense-heavy games. But because Street Fighter's offensive flow is very different than a lot of the other games we do play, it gets really interesting because you've pushed yourself down to a limited set of options and higher limits on your actual range, your ability to use your attacks from long distances, into a much more refined game. This is something we are also expecting to need to do at the beginning of Street Fighter 6, because the type of player who plays Street Fighter 6 early is going to be a very different type of player than the ones who play later on. Or rather, the ones at the early ranks. So if you want to get through in these games, we didn't want to think of this way before because it just seemed like such a sad way for FGC to go. But it is true, if you are able to get into a game day one and get your rank matches and get your rank up quickly enough, you get to somewhat avoid the style of player that leads us away from being able to deal with this easily. As you'll spend so much of your time trying to figure out, what am I supposed to do with this opponent that's just running away from me the entire time, instead of having to think about moment-to-moment defense and your opponent's potential plans. Even though we have been more playing games that require quick reactions recently, once you've landed a hit in those games, the specifics of what you need to do relative to the follow-up for those hits is really different. Ooh, that was definitely not the sort of thing that should drop. I wonder what happened with it. So once again, pushing our rabbit to make some much harder decisions in much quicker time periods. And therefore, the perfect opponent to show up before a tournament, to remind you, no, this is Street Fighter. The rest of it is what you have to play in ranked. But if you go to a tournament with people who play this game somewhat seriously, your opponents, after probably the first, maybe depending on how old the game is, starting right from the first, will be this, not what you normally face in, let's say, gold rank these days. This doesn't apply to all places though, because we definitely know that gold rank of certain parts of Europe is closer to this. But not consistently so. So even then, you still have to think about it. The form of the game where you'll find yourself thinking, is this a good decision or a bad decision, after you've already done it, and you won't know the answer until you see whether your opponent got hit or not. When you've reached the point of always thinking that your opponent is going to defend, it's easy to get caught up in the idea that any imperfect attack that didn't trick heavily what your opponent's perspective was itself an error. But you really shouldn't think of games like that for too long, because you'll end up in a bad space when you have to face this type of character. Sometimes what you really do need is the speed. Like that. And this is actually the primary reason why we bothered creating our bots in the way we did to begin with. Getting hit here, I think this is a kill because the weird... No, actually, Lara has like 1,000 health, right? And there they are, ready, completely ready. I don't think there was a way out of that. They saw the V-shift, they reacted to the V-shift with the crouch light punch. That was spectacular. This is a concept that's been well known in the FGC for a while, the ability to have two entirely different mental states for fighting players who have one mentality, and generally players who are either not understanding of the game or trying to not lose, versus players who either have a very strong understanding of the game and still have decided to not play in the not lose state, or don't have much understanding of the game but recognize that going really fast is in fact enough to get certain people off guard. And in a tournament, you really don't have time to figure out which of those two your opponent is. But it will teach you a bunch about your frame data, whether that's because your opponent knows that their attacks will beat yours and is setting you up for it, or just thinks that attacking faster or in specific ways may help. Every sign I've seen so far is this player knows exactly how they will handle every aspect of it, which makes them one of the favorite opponent types of Just Fine, because she finally gets to use both her defense and her specific perspective on offense to the maximum. Now, this is a hard to win matchup using that because Ryu can get into positions for big damage easier and has too many ways out of Bison's various powerful options. But she seems to have chosen both the V skill and V trigger required, thankfully. Presumably due to getting to see the match before. And knowing, okay, I have to play this game now, or rather I get to play this game now. But even this is a matter of remembering. If you are facing a very defensive opponent who generally doesn't pose much threat, you generally go for meaties that you quote-unquote shouldn't, simply because the worst they'll do is uppercut out. They won't actually be checking you, or maybe they'll hit like a crouch light punch or something. Yep. And yep, from the other side too. Increasing your speed in order to face this style of player becomes more and more important the more they get control of the match. If you can hold control for a long time through raw neutral skill, not necessarily through having a character who does that easily, but if you can hold neutral or hold even control for long enough, you shouldn't have as many problems because you're not going to get caught in loops that are either speed-based or understanding-based. But as this is our functionally strongest defensive player, it doesn't come up the same way a lot of the time. Notice the sort of person who literally heavy uppercuts in that situation. That is one of Bison's better knockdowns, but it isn't always going to be that way. Ooh, I think that was probably an input error, but maybe not. Oof, this is so difficult. But it's not difficult because Well, it is partially difficult because this player is awesome, but it is not entirely difficult just because of how good they are. It is partially difficult because if you get locked too long into people who don't know how to play these games, all of your instincts for dealing with this go away.
You win.
And it can, of course, be quite sad because this is what you need to use for your learning. But unfortunately, sometimes the only place you can get this is a very high level player who is willing to fight you for longer, or bots. On the upside though, if you have practiced against certain bots for long enough, you will often find yourself in a better position, because if you can get to the point of being able to be at, let's call it bot speed, primarily for our more advanced ones, you will at least understand what's happening. And since some players don't immediately declare it a waste of their time, if you can get there, it works better. This is also the place where we often find ourselves needing to pull out the matchup chart or whatever, if you have one of those, your notes basically. Because if you don't remember how to do specific aspects of matchups, you're more likely to be quickly defeated and frustrated, not because your opponent is playing in the standard frustrating way, but frustrated at yourself, which is way worse. Your decision-making process has to be based almost entirely on this factor. So I'm here wondering whether or not our Kareen remembers how to play this matchup. I'm not sure why she got hit by that. Was that a counter hit? I think it might have been. Above all else, you can get far too used to the idea of an opponent that you do just get to keep going at, and all of your focus should be on getting them to mess up a punish, or getting them to misread a situation so that you can do something tricky, instead of actually playing full neutral with them. So I think she could probably benefit more from playing more neutral, even though it is relatively hard to do against G sometimes. In this case, it's basically return to your natural state. And instead of thinking of situations that don't come out right as negative, just accept them as part of the effect of playing a high-level player. It's not like you are going to be unhurt. There we go. There we go. Okay, I can see it. She has at least remembered one thing. It may not be enough, given the opponent's choices, but it's at least there. A well-spaced Orochi is one of her strongest options in this matchup. She really doesn't need to care too much about the rest of what's going on, because once you've gotten G to the right position, you no longer care, and the Orochi is the easiest way to get him there without putting yourself at risk. Understanding when it is time to do that though, and when it is time to actually play footsies normally, is pretty hard. Still, we can see her speed getting back up. And the main problem is going to be as usual, because G does a lot of damage. Ooh, too far off. If you've ever found yourself not feeling the urge to play this game because you know this is not what you're going to get from your opponents, try putting Serious Match in your Battle Lounge thing and hope for the best. The wolf is a little bit more strained by this sort of opponent normally, but that... Wow, I just realized I have to say this. This is a real line that I must deliver. The wolf has not fought an opponent of this caliber since before we started seriously playing King of Fighters. So it might be that he will just go straight into mental state, especially in this matchup, where he doesn't really need to do as much of anything. Luke is not terribly strong against Crawling Beast Nikali. He's definitely able to beat you to death, more or less, once he's gotten enough meter and gets in. And he's good at avoiding certain forms of damage, so I would expect this to still be what, health-wise, is a blow-up in iHike Ultralight's favor. But the actual playing through of it, I don't necessarily expect to be that bad, because it's not an overwhelming matchup for Nikali as a core thing. It's an overwhelming matchup from this player. Not sure why the jump happened though. Okay, now I don't know what he's doing exactly. Luke's options for hitting Nikali when he's doing the Crawling Beast itself at decent ranges are pretty bad. And getting around the move is not something Luke is able to easily do for various reasons. He has too many linear attacks that collide with it, similar to how you can use it to mess with Dalsim. Which is why you see things like that dash. But it does look like our Nikali is aiming to play at least some footsies first, which I can't necessarily agree with, but there might be a reason for this. It's a problem mainly because Luke's damage can be too explosive for Nikali to deal with outright in many situations. So yeah, it does in fact look like he just hasn't managed to get back in the mental state required yet. This could also be because, from the same perspective, there's literally no way to know whether or not any given Luke player can do this. Meaning that it's possible that the wolf has just never fought Luke, per se. If everything you've been taught about this matchup is that your opponent will not attack you, that you cannot afford to do certain things because you have to spend all your time getting in, this is a pretty reasonable response to have, flow-wise. Unfortunately, I guess I don't really have much to say if the match turns into primarily footsies. So a bit unfortunate.
It's go time. Let's do this.
But I can definitely sympathize. Because in a lot of ways, that feeling is of realizing that you have to try to remember how to play this game. On my end, this is a little unfortunate in a different way because obviously this is not exactly one of Chun-Li's best matchups, but I do have a way to play it that I kind of enjoy. But
No need for talk. Let's do this.
does it work on a guy who's willing to do crouch light punch into that? I think I'd have to bat dash more in that space. I could try that though. Yeah, I'm gonna go with the bat dash instead of this. Ooh, I did not get that one. I was so expecting to get that one. And did not get that one either. Okay, that one made sense. Is this enough? No.
Round 2. Fight.
This is precisely that moment of remembering a bunch of tools you never had to use recently. But I'm awake now. Ah, that's not how you do that one. I don't feel as if I should say to myself that I deserved that. I think that was just my opponent playing really well. The lag isn't really a problem per se, but it is definitely making me have more trouble with a specific aspect of this matchup than I thought I would. That was not what I expected to see at all. Wow. That was me failing that altogether. I do appreciate their timing, and I did stop back dashing, but that was because my opponent immediately countered the fact that I did it. So this might be a little bit hard to commentate as a match while playing it, because what is happening, what is going through my head and possibly their head, is changing so fast that I probably would not be able to talk quickly enough to tell you what is going on here. Some of it is obviously going to be issues with execution as well, but okay. Whew. I still don't have that down, and I forgot I didn't. Ah, I feel so alive. The problem is this, is that it puts so much tension on my hands so quickly that I can't do it for long. Which is definitely a thing that I wish was more practicable. But it just doesn't come up. See, I want to do this way. Yes, there we go. I dropped that. Okay. One of the biggest problems with this matchup, with this match, is that I never want to go back to not playing this again. Now, within the team, I can have similar matches. That's definitely true. But after a while of playing people who play basically one character, if you're the analyst, you can mess with them faster than they can mess with you. And the problem quickly pops up. Okay. Ah, I should have thought that was going to happen. Okay, I'm going to let you sit this one out this time. Shooting off the bat dash. I couldn't be sure whether or not the back heavy kick would cause me to get hit by the fireball, you see. That's what I need Tensho Hyaku for. I feel like I'm not blocking correctly somehow, but I can't tell why. Yeah, right there. I'm not sure what it is I'm doing that results in that, me getting hit by the low, because as far as I can tell, I'm holding the down back fine, but I am playing on PS5 controller and a little bit unused to it. Woo! And there it goes. I definitely should not have thrown that. Good games to Ultralight. But unfortunately, that is perfect for describing this situation as a generality. This is why it is important to go to tournaments, particularly big open tournaments and not just your local where someone has developed a strategy to beat you style-wise and just sticks to it. You need to be able to push yourself, and it may not be very obvious if you are stuck in silver or stuck in gold and just facing the same sort of thing all the time. Whether you are on the side of the person who is quote-unquote running away, trying to not lose, or the person who is struggling against that playstyle, you're both suffering a lot of the time. Ibuki, huh? This will be hard for the exact same reason. Although, to be fair, Omni the Rabbit has some experience with an Ibuki who fights at least awake enough. And our Ibuki bot is actually quite good because she's such a frame data / concept dependent character that just practicing with the bot enough will give you a lot of insight into how you're supposed to deal with her. Not necessarily because she's very dependent on things like that, because even if you did practice against the bot for long enough, you wouldn't necessarily be able to do anything about it. She's built for that to work at least some of the time. But the main concern I'd have here for Omni is remembering all of the little tricks that this matchup requires, and there are a lot, because Ibuki can negate a lot of what you'd consider normal Lara play. A lot of it. You don't even want to be that close to this character. So while you shouldn't necessarily play Lara in a zoning mode, thinking through which of her options to use can be really difficult. This is a match where you take a lot of, let's call it risks with her stand heavy punch and try to get the max range stand heavy punch. Or a forward heavy punch that doesn't actually hit, because Ibuki doesn't really get a huge damage payoff. Even now that her buttons on options have changed, you can just use a lot of heavy punch shenanigans in this matchup and expect that, yes, you'll get hit for sure, but the way in which you get hit isn't necessarily overwhelming. It's also important to view reversal because the chances of you getting sway off in this matchup in a way that matters to you a lot are quite small, whereas Ibuki's strings tend to not be very tricky in the V-reversal section, and you get to that as your option select. But we go back to what I was mentioning before about the two different mental modes. If you start fighting a quote-unquote runaway opponent in this mode, all that will happen is that you will be doing way more calculations than them, And they will probably, if you are not perfect enough, get lucky, do big damage, and then you die. Ooh, wonder why that was missed. Again, probably out of practice. That is definitely one of those things where it's like, oh, I wish I had fought Ibuki Bot even more. Because I think that is, in fact, not necessarily punishable outright, but the situation would have been better with slightly better timing and expectation of either definitely making it or not making it. This is also a matchup where your backdash is very important, but please note that if you do backdash, you are giving up the chance to get damage if Ibuki does something wrong. Once you are in close in that situation, you don't really want to be challenging her normally. But because for many characters, her buttons are not that great at catching their backdashes or doing big damage, you generally are okay with it. Too much speed there. Confidence in not going for the V-reversal. But then it brings us back to understanding of Laura, which our opponent immediately demonstrates. If you are dealing with all those heavy punches, you need to neutral jump at some point. And that's just going to work. There's no thing that stops this from working on Laura, because so often her primary options to make a matchup bearable and not just her sitting at the other end of the screen the whole time hoping for the best will allow you to neutral jump. You see another good reason why that button and that interaction works that way. There is definitely a timing where Ibuki doesn't get to gain anything from hitting kunai in that space. Another situation where you generally just want to backdash. Solving your problems with Ibuki by more so backdashing than going for the hit is just something you have to learn by experience. There's no block button in Street Fighter.
Round 2. Fight.
Backdashing time. Oh, well, I guess given that that brings up the thing that we talk about a lot that is super helpful, but is hard to explain now that the moment has passed.
Ibuki wins.
When you are constantly making yourself do a new thing, or a thing you don't remember too often that you have to do because it's not the first thing to do in other matchups, such as backdashing out of Ibuki pressure. There will be times where you are too stressed to think about doing it. And when you find yourself too stressed to do it, you're just really hoping that it coincides. I think their net is busted. You're really hoping that it coincides with that moment where you can't. Your opponent has decided to try to beat the thing you kept on doing. I have no idea. Everyone's like stuff is being weird now. Let's wait. Did that player even play the first time? I'm so lost now. Anyway, the point is still the same. When you're stressed, and don't do the backdash that you were quote-unquote supposed to do. If that happens to be the moment where your opponent thought, oh, you're going to backdash, I should do the risky thing that beats the backdash. Now your own stress reaction has played into a victory condition. You didn't backdash because you were not thinking about it, because it's not the first thing you think of, but your opponent didn't know that. And they went for the way to beat the backdash, which led to them getting hit by you standing your ground and being ready. All these micro thoughts and realizing, oh, I forgot to do something, rather than force yourself to do it again, wait and see if you resettle after taking damage or after landing a big combo. Those are the optimal times in many games, particularly games that aren't high octane literally every moment. Those are the best times to reset yourself, to reload all the things in mind you're supposed to do. But it goes down even further. Every time you fail to do that, if you've demonstrated the ability to do that at some point, your opponent now doesn't know for sure whether or not you are in the stressed state or the ready state. So the fact that you can't do it every single time, the fact that you get stressed and don't always manage to do the correct thing, even that can be used as a strength. This is something that came up on a Daigo stream recently, I believe. But Daigo actually calls it out in himself a lot whenever he does it. He'll note that he did the wrong thing or did the incorrect thing relative to the plan, but because the opponent did something else to try to beat the plan, he'll just go, oh, that was lucky. Because he did the quote-unquote wrong thing, but the opponent did the thing meant to beat the right thing and therefore lost. Oof, that would have been hard to be ready for though, because it is... Actually, would it even have worked? Akuma does lose the ability to get a certain type of counter to a neutral jump once he has V-trigger active, so you have to be a little bit careful about keeping that sort of thing in mind. Transformative V-triggers often cause some minor problems to their users for precisely that reason. There is some scenario in which you have to do something differently, and in the unfortunate cases where that's defensive, you're not necessarily able to shift quickly enough. When it's a matter of doing things on offense and getting enough damage and just dropping the damage is a big deal but not crippling, especially if you don't get punished for it, it's still a knockdown. It's much easier to deal with, well, my transformation messed me up. I guess I'll just have to keep on trying to win the other way. This is still somewhat stressful in matches like this, simply because if you had V-trigger, there's a decent chance you were not quite winning uncontested or anything, but you could still manage to get out of it. It's worst in the case of someone like Akuma, where the opponent can specifically go for a counter based on the fact that you've activated trigger, and it's not just, okay, you can't V-reversal me anymore. It's explicitly, I can make you miss and I can make you lose by following an instinct that you might otherwise normally have.
Round one. Fight.
Oof, the timing. Still working on those combos apparently. And since they're still working on specific ranges, this can be a big problem in this matchup because, as we've said many times, Necalli is really good at putting you at ranges that he wants you to be at. But it's kind of insidious sometimes too. He doesn't have to hit buttons for this to happen. Sometimes just it's the nature of Necalli's buttons themselves that cause the issue. Or if you're spending more time thinking about the fact that, yeah, I was never going to get hit by that string anyway, and then focus on your own offense in some way, micro walks, all of these little things can help the Necalli player get your mind off the fact that they have controlled your spacing. It is one of his best ways, I believe, to cause the opponent to have to think a lot to begin with.
Necalli wins.
Alright, let's see what the collateral damage from whatever wave just went through the internet was. Okay, that means I'm going to back. Since I guess some stuff just got wobbled around. And I don't know what this player is doing exactly, but it looks like they're also... maybe not. Okay, one more try then. If you don't want to fight, let it drop. There they are. I don't remember if we actually saw them fight before, but the connection looks okay. The problem is it's actually wiggling, as in you can see that it's not consistent. But 4 or 5 consistent is very different from 2, 3 consistent, so let's hope for the best. I will let you know if I get any reports that this was particularly laggy. Lounge is now full once again. So I hope you're enjoying the stream action itself, but there is little chance that you're going to be able to join into it anytime too soon. Especially if your hope is to get matches with iHeight Ultra, because most likely if the slot opens up, it'll be because it's them that left. I wonder if I can discuss possibly the difference, because 262 LP is a very interesting number. I seem to remember this being a quote-unquote zero beast number. Because of the way that the game assigns rank points, there's a certain specific amount that you end up at if you just went, okay, let me just test this out, let me get some rank points for buying costumes or whatever. But I'm so great that I don't need to play more. And it's really hard to tell with Ken players because, honestly, it's always been true to the point where it's a meme that the correct way to play a Ken is to look like you don't know how to play the game. This is really often the truth. I'm gonna go with no Zero Beast this time though, because if nothing else, that would indicate to me that that's not what really you're trying to do here. I can't think of a reason why you do. Unless you were used to playing Ken with the other V-trigger. See where we are? We still don't know. There's no way to know precisely. But that's fine because thankfully the style you need to fight Ken with pretty much any character, it really doesn't matter. If anything, that's more of a simplification of the situation. If Ken players in general will fight in this way, you only have to learn one style. But they are certainly forward-playing enough, let's call it aggressive enough, that we aren't really thinking in terms of, yeah, this is going to be someone trying to not lose more so than they are specifically aiming to win or overpower. So we're not going to get a contrast of the same type today. It's actually super important to put Ken in V-Trigger too sometimes, just so you learn that you can't just to get it into your head that you can't crush counter Shinryuken, that it's actually a finish that you have to have a standard combo for. The reports I'm getting from the team is that something's up with their connection. Maybe it's something in our area, or maybe just... It shouldn't be Street Fighter itself, though. But let's hope this instability doesn't lead to lag in itself.
Round 1. Fight.
We are closing in on the end of a very good and relatively meaningful / helpful stream. But the lounge is likely to stay open, so no worries on that front. This is entirely just us keeping content down to an hour still. Minor accuracy issues, I think. Notice that a move technically doesn't even come up as counter hit when you punish it. So even if you had counter hit combos for those situations, for like when you couldn't quite reach a light uppercut or something, or your opponent has some special one that doesn't exactly interact normally like Urien, not even those are helpful. So you probably could benefit from learning to some extent the most powerful super close range punish you have, which of course differs by character, and you can think in terms of whether or not it's worth your time to use any metered options that you can't normally use. Weirdly, for a lot of characters, I think this starts with a command grab, but I'm not sure this is true for Nakali. You'd probably be aiming more for something that gave you a V cancel. And spectating is gone. You should not assume that that was anyone rage quitting, even if they're gone, because, as I said, things are super unstable right now, somehow. Maybe they'll return, but if they don't, it means that we now have one more open slot in the lounge again. So we are back to I Hike Ultralight and the Wolf getting another opportunity. Not necessarily another opportunity at Luke, but we'll see. I don't think DeWolf has a loop bot, but I can never be sure because which bots are input on different people's systems. I usually have like a list, but the more recent the bot is, the less sure I am, especially for Street Fighter specifically, because mostly we've moved on from Street Fighter bot training to keep skills up to a specific level in other games. As usual, this is like the once a week tournament level play thing. I'm pretty sure that even DeWolf does not really play this game that much outside of these lounges.
Round 1. Fight.
Sometimes that means, when I say that, it means they don't play against other people, but play against bots. But in this case, I'm pretty sure I mean, no, they don't fight in this game at all. Okay, so we've got perfect defense for you here. And this is kind of hard for our Nakali because it involves walking a lot in a way that isn't really all that natural to this character. And when you are forced to walk a lot, that is the precise moment that Ryu gets to throw fireballs. Nakali does have an option though, because he can put down the crawling beast and walk behind it, and just be ready with the anti-air. What you're looking for is often the spacing at which you could get the anti-air off without worrying. Reset, but blocked. Another decent option is to just use EX Stomp if you think you've made it into space to begin with. But as noted, this is our player that has more trouble with this level of opponent because, to be frank, and I don't think he'll be particularly upset if I say this, the Wolf doesn't actually have most of the upper level to wake up to yet in these games. And that can be a confusing thing to face when you're dealing with like a friend group of people who play a game a lot and people who don't. If you are in a group such as that, where one person can just literally turn on a specific mindset and everything just work for them suddenly, it can feel as if you're not understanding what's up there, like you're not making progress. But the thing is, it's so much a progress question. It has to do with the way you think about the game in general. Like, even this has a specific purpose. The player decided, well, okay, if you can't deal with my defense here, here's some offense to deal with. But, as I said, the Wolf doesn't necessarily have the next level to go to yet, and is still working on it. So this is similar to our usual situation in this case, and means that I don't feel so weird about it not being a Mish-Mashing lounge. Part of the reason why you might find certain high-level players do this, and you can usually tell because of which moves they hit you with, isn't necessarily that they're just trying to troll you. It is, in many ways, the way to change your own mindset back against an opponent who has the option to control a lot of things. And Necalli is exactly that, a character who can control a lot of things. You don't really want that character to get too much leeway, but you also don't want to let yourself get into the mindset of thinking too hard about your match. So, find the thing that works against them and do it so that you can keep your own mental state in that position. And usually, because it's not as stressful or challenging to do overall, you're better off. Did we start late? I'm not absolutely sure, but I think we're going to let this one run before we close up. The lounge itself is not closing, but the stream will be, so. What do we get this time? For those of you who are KOF fans, we're still in the process of editing through the KOF Snow Angel bot inputs across the pages to make sure everything's perfect. We get the Ryu rematch. What went wrong in this one last time from Just Fine side? I think it wasn't anything specific that went wrong per se. Probably, I know what it was, and it was one of those high level things that doesn't come to mind immediately. Probably needed to actually not V-reversal that much. But now that she might have more understanding and expectation of the player's style and capacity, she may not feel the need to do so as much. Ooh, slightly missed, because that would have been having to figure out which side you were on. This is another useful situation because when Bison absorbs a fireball entirely, it does in fact help his V meter, which is, honestly, depending on what the opponent is doing, quite useful in this matchup. These are situations you can backdash out of if you want to. But she doesn't always feel the need to do so because why bother? Once you've got enough meter though, that what you just saw is a good enough reason, simply because it puts Bison at advantage in a way that really matters.
Round 2. Fight.
That was perfectly timed, I think. As was that. No way around it that time. But I am surprised that she went for the dash afterward. I guess getting out of the corner was important though.
Perfect KO. Final round.
But now we have a Ryu that won't throw fireballs because, or apparently not, but that would still probably not be their primary concept of how it should work because of the same reason. I'm surprised she didn't go to the other side there. For mainly this reason exactly. I'm gonna really hope, especially coming up to tournaments, that she hasn't trained herself all the way to that level of explicitly not bothering to get to the other side of the opponent simply because, yeah, why would it help me? That does happen sometimes. Your entire core base strategy ends up having to change because of the opposing side.
Round 1. Fight.
A little slow still, as noted. Kinda sad there, but it's probably a good reminder. No matter how much ECT goes particularly well or poorly, this will probably work as the reminder of, oh yeah, this isn't so surprising, if it goes poorly that is, because I was kinda slow, and I felt it. I got to watch myself be slow in a different match. That was one of those times where you kind of just had to do it. The problem I find with this specific set of things is that you can't be sure whether or not Bison's parry will actually save you. It's one of those things that's slightly too inconsistent to count on if your opponent jumps in those situations. Dashed after it again. Wait, why is the meat on the... Oh, no, okay, never mind. We are probably not streaming as much, if at all, for the rest of this week. Expect to see very little because it's ECT week. We're either training or preparing to actually travel, or at least the ones of us that are around. If we do have any reason to have any streams, you will hear about them on our Twitter to _MK_FGC at the usual timings related to streams in general, 7:30 Eastern or 7:30 Central European time, I believe. I should really check that. But that brings us to the end of the stream for tonight. Jump into the lounge if you want to. North America, anywhere on the Atlantic Ocean. This has been Rillian, 14 2MK. Good luck with your training and good night, everyone.